Welcome to the Ministry of Gray, where we break free from black and white thinking and uncover the truth somewhere in the middle. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your girl, Satan's little side piece, and welcome back to the Ministry of Gray podcast. Now, today we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff. I mean, it is inauguration week, so buckle up, grab your comfort food, and sit back and stay a while and listen. So first off, I've got to talk about the week we've had. We just saw the inauguration of Donald Trump this morning. And yes, I'm still, for whatever reason, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this, right? The speech was, wow, full of disturbing vitriol, clear reflection of the policies he's pushing forward, boots on the ground in sanctuary cities, color blindness, and merit, said a shit ton in my book. Overall, the rhetoric, I mean, he was being just as divisive and damaging as always. Like, were we really that surprised?
No, 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 no.
And honestly, as Americans, it's really hard to not feel anxious about the future, right? Take TikTok, for instance. Are we about to lose one of the most popular platforms, or is it just another political maneuver? Right now, everybody's like really on the fence about this because, as some have reported, apparently China is kind of starting to signal they'd be allowing TikTok to sell, including its algorithm. I mean, seriously, millions of people, especially younger Americans, are using this every day. But here we are. We got this looming question mark. We're still kind of floating in Sheol, in purgatory, in the land in between of limbo, right? And don't even get me started on the sheer exhaustion I'm having just trying to keep up with all the legislative chaos coming out of Washington, D.C. this week. It feels like an endless barrage of sexist bills, oppressive laws, and discriminatory orders. I mean, it's enough to make anybody wonder if we're heading for more of the same, worse, a whole new country dynamic, which is what I'm really worried about because it sounds like the U.S. as we know it, they are truly trying to completely reshape this in a very exclusionary Christian nationalist perspective. So yeah, join me today. We're going to talk about Trump's meme coin crash, the TikTok ban and what it really means for our free speech, and net neutrality and how that's going to directly impact the internet and how we know it. Let's get into it. Let's talk about Trump's meme coin, its crash, and some new details that are coming to light in the financial ethics just around this entire thing. Because financial ethics is a huge problem for Trump. He's got a regular history of this. So let's start off with something to me, it's baffling and it's also deeply disturbing on several levels. For a while, it looked like that, well, for 24 hours, it looked like that this NFT was going to be completely untouchable. I mean, and this guy, as we know, he can sell anything. Steaks, Trump University, golden sneakers, branded Bibles. Like, are we surprised that he launched crypto? I seriously was not. I was just like, okay, he's just cashing in on his political persona again. The Trump token's journey wasn't smooth, okay? And it definitely hasn't been the profitable path that people were initially expecting. And as you know, I mean, everyone was touting it as like the next big thing for his supporters, and they were seeing it as a way to get their political hero supported. And it also was like opening their door into crypto space. I feel like he was like kind of just sticking a toe in the water. But it didn't take long for things to go south. See, what happened is initially Trump's token like took off immediately. It went up to like $64, $65 in value. And then his wife, Melania, launched her own coin the next day, which immediately undercut his own coin by 38%. 100%. Just drastic. It comes down to, is this ethical or exploitive? And looking at this situation, I feel like it's a classic case of political power for personal enrichment. Trump made a career out of leveraging his name and brand to sell things. We've seen this. Selling a meme coin that's essentially useless without any underlying assets or utility is just like icing on the cake to me with this guy. The issue here, though, is that his followers, many of whom are, they're loyal to his brand ideologically, and now they're left holding the bag when this coin completely goes under. And it's, to me, financial exploitation wrapped up in the guise of political support. And remember, this man is famous for leaving his followers and his fans holding the bag. Look what happened in Coachella. He held the rally, and then all of these old people were like stranded out there, and he had already left. There was nothing. He does not fucking care. So yeah, it's one thing to me to sell a product in a marketplace and like the consumer can decide if it's worth their money. But I think when you're selling something to people who follow you, who idealize you as not just a businessman or political figure, but almost like a godhead, okay? This is someone they're trusting. That's an inherent power imbalance. And while consumers may have been willing participants in this, I feel like there's a huge lack of transparency around the coin's real value and the fact that Trump's brand could directly impact the price, making this really, really exploitive altogether. Many in the crypto industry are already asking if and how would Trump be held accountable for the collapse of a Trump coin? Because clearly it's not going to hold its value forever. And I think currently it is rebounding, but again, it's an NFT. So to me, this brings up an even bigger question about the ethics for launching personal financial ventures. Yeah, you've got the freedom to spend your money how you want, but where are we going to draw the line, okay, between financial freedom and financial manipulation? We have to talk about the legal side of this. There's already reports that investors are exploring potential lawsuits about this from what, could be construed as market manipulation or fraud. And if you've ever been curious about how hard it is to hold a public figure accountable in the crypto market, like look no further than this example. We're seeing the intersection of politics, celebrity, and financial speculation, and all of the rules of the game are like completely murky. I really think this is going to be one of those situations where the law is just not completely equipped to address complex ethical dilemmas, especially regarding a president, or at the point when he launched it, a president elect in speculative financial products. I'm personally of the opinion that whether it's cryptocurrency, a university degree, a political agenda, Trump has like really made it crystal fucking clear. His brand is nothing about providing value. It's only about creating financial opportunities for himself and those close to him. And in this case, his followers are once again suffering the consequences. Here's another thing to think about when we're discussing this. It's the concept of ideological capitalism. Now, we've seen this play out in numerous ways over the past few decades. We've seen gun manufacturers sell to conservative customers, crypto projects launched by celebrities, Sam Bankman-Fried again. The line between political and profit is like completely blurred. And what's troubling is that the way it taps into the emotional investment of people, much like cults do. Give me all of your finances and support our cause, leave your family behind if they don't want to support me. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of this going on. So the loyalty clearly isn't to the brand, but to this ideology overall. The ability of figures like Trump to commodify ideologies, this really poses serious questions about power structures in our country as a whole. In essence, we are living in an environment where one can make financial decisions, but they're influenced not just by the market, but by your personally held beliefs. And honestly, guys, that's a really dangerous game to play because it's eroding at the ethical boundaries that should exist between political figures and celebrities, corporations, and business ventures. And I haven't even gotten into the role of the crypto market space because while I recognize how important it is for decentralization, it is rife with risks right now. Like the lack of regulations in the space has allowed people like Trump to operate with little transparency. Even this, consider that Melania's token talked about how it's being divested through like 5 different areas between liquidity, the public, charities, private held account, and administrative overhead. It said they did this that way it would help hold on to its value. But then when they actually investigated, all of this is being held in one wallet, not 5. That's the problem here. Cryptocurrency is a powerful financial tool, but it's a hotbed for scams and manipulations like what we're seeing. Now, you figure Trump's name obviously carries weight, but it also carries a brand that's associated with controversy and questionable financial practices. So the Trump coin's potential failure isn't a simple matter of just a failed investment. It's an example of what happens when you have financial power and political influence. We're in an environment where people are so willing to believe in the next big thing, they often just don't ask, is this really worth my investment?
Shut up and take my money.
And while some of us could be tempted to just dismiss this as another failed project, you really can't overlook that broader implication. This token is reflecting the fragility of trust we have in today's marketplace and how easily public is being manipulated and just further increasing the fragility of that trust. Quick reminder, folks, if you're finding value in today's episode, take a moment to hit that like button, share it with a friend, subscribe wherever you're tuning in. Also, please don't miss out on all the extras I have waiting for you on my website, mogpodcast.com. That's mogpodcast.com. From behind-the-scenes content to ways you can support or work with us, it's all there. Plus, you'll get a sneak peek at future episodes and special guests. Thanks for being here. I could not do this without you. Now, this episode is going to feel like a really tech-oriented episode that we're talking about issues in our segments, but all of the topics today really impact our freedom of speech and how we're being manipulated. So that's why I think it's also important we discuss, our government's growing control over online speech, from foreign influence to state-sponsored media. I'm just going to get right into the meat of this. We've been hearing a lot lately about TikTok and the ban. It's like literally a battleground right now for claims of foreign influence and manipulation. But honestly, guys, this is not just about TikTok. There's a way bigger forest of issues to be looking at here. The U.S. government right now, well, I should say it's more the Trump administration than the U.S. government trying to control online speech. And they're doing this all under the guise of protecting us from foreign adversaries like China. And let me tell you, that's a lot of doublespeak happening right now that we're going to have to unpack in this, because we're going to start first with TikTok. The GOP has been using it as a rallying cry against China's propaganda machine. That's been going on since 2019, when then President Trump literally wrote an executive order banning the app, all based on allegations of how the Chinese influence was threatening American youth. Trump and his allies are still banging this drum about how the app's parent company ByteDance is a threat to national security. They're making a lot of false claims about it being owned by China, for one, and that, potentially the Chinese Communist Party, CCP for short, could, 10 years down the road, influence and compromise government workers here in the U.S. Now, I don't think there's any doubt that the app actually gathers a ton of data, personal data, about every one of its users. I mean, that's commonplace no matter what app you're using, no matter what country it's originating from. And while I think there are security risks associated with any app that you use, and that this should be taken seriously, you have to really look at the underlying motive here. I'm not here to defend China. I'm not a fan of CCP's censorship or this authoritarian grip that they have on their people. But there's a lot of hypocrisy showing when we're discussing this. Like, the GOP, again, is saying foreign interference, especially from China, and this is why they need to clamp down on social media platforms. And if on face value, guys, this totally sounds reasonable. I get it. We don't want foreign adversaries messing with our democracy, okay? Fine. But there's a twist to this. This isn't just about foreign influence anymore. The GOP is using this China narrative as a justification to go after platforms that they don't have control over, platforms that don't play ball with their messaging. Tom Cotton, U.S. Senator, he said it's not just foreign-owned apps that are part of an adversarial regime. It's any platform that's influenced by adversarial regimes at the same time. The real agenda clearly is about silencing platforms that don't align with political goals of the GOP. This has nothing to do with foreign influence. And what's more disturbing to me is the end game. They're literally setting the stage for state sponsored media that they claim they're trying to fight. Trump himself has even been overtly threatening media networks like BC, CNN, and even tech CEOs. Don't forget, Trump publicly threatened to go after CNN and other networks that he didn't like because they fact checked him too much. His administration was immediately labeling any media that doesn't parrot his talking points as fake news. A term that, frankly, guys, that was more about silencing criticism than promoting truth. All of this really brings me back to the philosopher John Stuart Mill. He argued that free speech is non-negotiable. Like, it's a central pillar to the function of a free society. He said if all mankind minus one were of one opinion and only one person were of the opposite opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be in silencing mankind. In other words, even if someone's views are wildly unpopular, they have the right to voice them. Mill believed that the only time speech should be suppressed is if it directly harms others. Any MAGA listening to me say this right now would be like, see, this is what we're talking about. I should be able to talk about horse ivermectin and Jewish space lasers if I want to. Or, the Haitians eating cats and dogs in Ohio. It's my right. I shouldn't be censored. But here's where we get into tricky territory with that type of speak. The GOP's current push to regulate platforms like TikTok, when you start seeing the government targeting platforms based on narratives of foreign influence, as we're seeing with TikTok and the obsession with China, you have to ask, is the harm even real? Is it an actual threat to national security? Or is this just an attempt to shut down ideas that don't align with the government's narrative to begin with? Mill would be wary of this kind of overreach. He'd likely argue that simply disagreeing with a platform's content, even if it's coming from a foreign adversary, doesn't justify censoring or shutting it down unless it's directly causing harm. When you're making false statements about Haitians eating dogs and cats, you're directly causing harm to the Haitian community. You're going to subject them to discrimination, stereotyping, prejudicial treatment in their communities. That's why that's not okay. Trying to say that the January 6th Capitol riot and insurrection was a loving rally full of hugs and peace and just gentle protesting when 5 officers passed away, hundreds were injured. That is directly harming the thin blue line that you claim to support because you're going, look, that's no big deal. That wasn't a big deal that happened to them. It's being blown out of proportion that hundreds of officers were hurt. This is what we're talking about. This is what Mill is talking about. Instead, no one's being worried about the government trying to create a false equivalence between dissenting opinions and foreign influence. And this is allowing them to push forward on an agenda of control over speech. And then when we come back to social media and the push for quote unquote fairness, many people are like, what about the facts? Conservative news platforms, including some of the loudest voices in Trump's campaign, Marjorie Taylor Greene,
bleach blonde, bad built, butch body,
routinely post misinformation. No one can deny this, okay? The issue here is that these platforms cry foul when their content gets fact checked or labeled misleading by other social media communities like Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram, and so on. Their response when this happens, when they're confronted with the facts, is it's unfair censorship. But here's the fact. Here's the real kicker. Conservative content gets fact-checked more because it's posting more easily debunked nonsense than anyone else. Whether the information is about election fraud, COVID-19, ninth-month abortions,
sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
The conservative movement has been far more prone to spreading disinformation compared to others. Yet when fact-checking platforms do their job, it's still being called unfair censorship and even foreign influence. This is where the doublespeak becomes undeniable. The GOP is using the narrative of foreign interference to justify shutting down platforms that they don't control or that fact-check their own lies. And if we zoom in on the MAGA crowd for a second, they've been blinded by the rhetoric completely. Trump says China is bad, that they control their media, and that their censorship is a form of a totalitarian control. And yet here he is doing the exact same fucking thing. He wants to regulate and shut down any platform that challenges his narrative, whether it's about the election or about his political rivals. And if Trump could have gotten away with it, he probably would have started his own state media. Oh, I'm sorry. Truth Social, anybody? And now he's trying to strongly influence media channels to toe his line. I mean, think about it. The idea of curbing free speech in the name of political control. That's straight out of the CCP's playbook, y'all. Trump's anti-foreign rhetoric around China, it's just a smokescreen. He's pushing for the very things he claims to abhor, a controlled narrative. And he has a pattern of doing this. He says one thing, he does another. The double standard here is staggering. The GOP wants to go after social media platforms for being biased against conservative views. Come on, let's be real. They're not fighting for free speech. They're fighting to eliminate dissenting voices. They want to silence any platform that doesn't agree with their worldview, and the best way to do that is to try and wrap it all up in a neat little package with a bow and label it foreign interference or national security. So I have to ask you, for those who like to post proven misinformation and just downright refuse to have a standard of evidence where you can go, look, if you can show me this, I will change my acceptance of this information. You need to get to this point, because do we really want to let state media happen? We don't live in a world of state media. They're trying to tell you that we do, but that's not facts. When you're being handed lies and repeating them, and then you're being told, listen, that news source, that political figure is lying to you, and here are 50 studies of proof, and all you can say is, I don't trust the government, so fuck those studies. You're living in a world of cognitive dissonance. You're being willfully irresponsible just for the sake of holding on to your bias and your hero worship instead of holding them accountable. Accountability is critical in leadership, because then you're ensuring that your interests are always front and center. When someone tells you about the dangers of something, ask yourself what's really going on here and who's benefiting from this push for censorship. But don't only look at one side of that coin. Always flip it to the other. If you're listening to a news show and you're only finding your head shaking yes, 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 and you're feeling yourself physically getting fired up, take a pause, take a breath, go do some research, and be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, what level of evidence do I need in order to change my view? And if you're finding yourself discounting everything except that one source, or like only conservative news, only conservative podcasters, only conservative pastors and preachers, you need to be stepping back and understanding you're only looking at one side of the garden of information, and you're not getting a full spectrum picture. I really hope you're enjoying the show so far, and if you're loving what you hear, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay updated with all of my episodes. Your support really helps me grow and reach more people like yourself. And guess what? There's even more for you over on my website, mogpodcast.com. That's mogpodcast.com. Please check it out. Get the scoop on upcoming episodes, exciting guests, and all the ways you can support this podcast. Thanks for being part of the MOG Cast family. All right, so we're going to continue on this online communication tech vibe that we've got going on this episode. And we really need to talk about how the earlier failure of the Biden administration repealing net neutrality has a lot of dark consequences for our free speech that ties directly in with what we were just discussing in the previous segment. Now, I want to break down the cold hard reality of this net neutrality fight for you, because after the ruling by the Supreme Court back on January 2nd of this year, blocking the Biden administration to bring back these regulations, there's so many consequences for this going forward with this whole state media agenda. If you've been paying attention, you know that net neutrality was about ensuring the internet stayed free, kept it open, and that all the information was being treated equally no matter who produced it. If you wanted to go sit on Fox News or watch Alex Jones,
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
there was no ISP throttling it, blocking you from using it, nothing. You could just go straight there and use it. Now, we're going to watch the corporatization of our access to information, and it's setting the stage for a future where the powerful control everything we hear. You think that we have this problem now. Honey, no we don't. This isn't just about a business deciding what it's going to support or donate to, subscribe, represent, whatever you want to call it. It's about controlling what you can see, hear, and say. Now, there's a thought leader I love to talk about in the realm of net neutrality, and that is Tim Berners-Lee. He's the founder of the World Wide Web, for those who don't know. And in 2017, he had warned that repealing net neutrality is going to lead to a world where the few control the many. The decision to hand ISPs, that's your internet service provider, the ability to throttle data and block content, this creates an ecosystem of inequality. The very thing that Berners-Lee has been warning about as a universal public utility. And this doesn't stop there. The idea of corporate control of the internet, this is about more than just blocking websites or slowing down services. It's about enabling the corporations to decide exactly what you're going to see, even based on their political or financial interests. Think about this. Imagine a healthcare company with close ties to the conservative elite, and they're running an internet service. They get to choose what healthcare content gets priority. Maybe they decide they want you to only see proprietary drug information and slow down or block health articles that, are critical of the pharma industry as a whole. Or maybe worse, they decide that certain political voices, say progressive voices advocating for universal health care, they're going to suppress them because it doesn't align with their bottom line. This isn't a hypothetical anymore. We're already seeing corporate influence, wreaking havoc in other industries like healthcare, where decisions are being made not on public need, but corporate greed. The consequences go way deeper, though. Extortion is also going to become a tool of influence when you've got powerful ISPs or tech CEOs like Musk who can control the flow of information. Also, look at just Trump and his relationship with Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, right? Trump's already has a history of threatening to use government power against this social media giant because he won't play ball with MAGA narratives. That's not democracy, guys. That's corporate extortion. Trump publicly pressured Zuckerberg to censor content critical of him. Mr. Zuckerberg literally bended the knee, bowing to the threat of retaliation. In fact, he even paid the man $1 million for his inauguration party.
Mr. Warbucks, do you know something? For a Republican, you are sinfully handsome.
Thank you.
You want to talk about kissing ass. And then he said, we're going to get rid of the fact-checking tools that we've got built in, and we're going to let the community handle the fact-checking instead. This just isn't about corporate interest anymore. It's about the use of internet as a political weapon, because not just Russian trolls and Chinese bots can skew the community fact-checking. So can our government, so can our political figures, so can corporations. Here's another thing. The kicker in all of this. This dynamic just doesn't benefit one side. Whether you're left-wing, right-wing, if you're somewhere in the middle like myself, I'm a political atheist, the moment you're inconvenient to those in power, they're going to shut you the fuck up too. It's already been happening to Republicans who've gone and spoke out against Trump. We saw it during January 6th, for instance. Trump demonized any GOP member who didn't follow his lead, even though they had a history of supporting all of his policies in the past. Liz Cheney is an excellent example of that. People go, oh, well, she's a rhino. And it's not really, because as a progressive, I still think she's a disgusting piece of shit because she supported 99% of all of Trump's policies, even up until the January 6th issues. This isn't just about keeping out foreign influence from platforms like TikTok, even though that's what they're claiming. It's about reshaping the internet into a political tool that works for those in power. The government, under the guise of national security, they're going to literally go out of their way to target platforms that are politically inconvenient. When China and Russia are brought into the conversation, the rhetoric's always about national security, and it becomes the perfect pretext for creating a media landscape where only the right messages get through. So, have you put all this together yet? If we let ISPs choose which websites are fast, which are slow, if we let them block content they don't agree with, and we let them determine who gets access to information, we're setting up a two-tiered internet. One that favors those who can pay for access, while the rest of us get watered-down versions of the truth. This is corporate-backed, state-run media in the making. Now, if you've never heard of Shoshana Zuboff, maybe you've heard of her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. If you haven't read this, read it, read it, read it. In this book, she explains how corporations are able to profit from controlling how we see the world, by exploiting our data and manipulating what we are exposed to. Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. There's so much that goes on in the background you don't even know. The internet as we know it could become a global information monopoly where who controls the narrative controls the world.
Gee, Brian, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky.
So Zuboff points out that obviously data is power. And when the government and corporations team up, hello Zuckerberg, Bezos, Musk, et cetera, with Trump, it's not just about profit. You know what the scariest part to me is about this? The average person doesn't even realize they're being played, especially if they're MAGA. When you believe that these measures are being put in place to protect you, to make the internet safer, or to prevent foreign interference, you are completely blinded to the real danger. The danger is that you're being sold an illusion of freedom while the walls are just closing in on your ability to express yourself. And here's where the us versus them mentality comes into play. If you think you're part of some kind of in crowd for supporting policies that have no guardrails on free speech or accuses fact-checking and accountability as censoring, don't get too comfortable. You're not exempt. Even if you think your views are safe today, corporate power is an ever-shifting beast. You could easily be completely out of favor tomorrow. Just look what happened between Musk and Vivek and MAGA when they said, guys, we need to keep the H-1B visas. People started attacking them saying, we don't want foreigners in office. We didn't elect you, blah, blah, blah. And what did Musk say? You're idiots. You're crackheads. You need to have MAGA removed root and stem. Vivek called you all lazy people who, preferred the popular jocks in TV shows and not the nerds. And when your views no longer fit the narrative, they're going to shut you the fuck up just as easily as the next guy. Look how former Vice President Mike Pence was treated by Trump. Trump expected him to not certify the election. Pence recognized he had no legal authority to take that action. Immediately, he was disposable. Trump did not care that there were crowds coming into that Capitol Hill to lynch him. Trump did not give a rat's fucking ass. He never even apologized. The same will happen to you if that could happen to Trump's right-hand man. So it's really important, guys. You have to understand. In matters of political convenience, Trump will marginalize you. The same thing is going to happen to all of us if we don't fight for our right to a free, open internet, a free online space to gather and exercise our free speech. Net neutrality isn't just some tech debate. It's about our fundamental right to access information without interference. And without it, we're all at risk of being reduced to just pawns in a political game. And that has far-reaching consequences for our democracy in the long run. All right, time to wrap up this episode. And today we've covered a lot. Everything from meme coins to ideological capitalism and the strings being pulled to make us go one way or another with our viewpoints. But let's be real. The biggest threat, it's not just these traps being set up for us. It's not noticing them because we're too comfortable sitting in our own little bubbles. Let me ask you something. Do you ever find yourself agreeing with everything a certain source says? Maybe a news outlet, a podcast, maybe social media feed. Feels good, right? Like you've got it all figured out? Well, that's where things are getting dicey, because if you're not challenging your own beliefs, you might just be falling into the easiest trap of all, your own cognitive bias. Now, here's how it works. We love feeling validated. We gravitate towards sources that tell us, you're right, the world's messed up, but you've got it figured out. And you know what? That's a really comfortable feeling. But the problem is when you're only seeing one side, you're not seeing the full picture. You're not seeing the forest. You're only looking at the single tree. This is how I've learned to catch myself. First, I'll ask myself why something feels so comfortable, especially if I'm consuming a lot of it. Is it because it's true, or is it because it's what I want to hear? Second, you should challenge the voices, that you trust the most. If you're nodding along all the time to your favorite news anchor or, TikTok creator, that could be a problem. The truth doesn't always feel good. It shouldn't always feel good. The truth can be messy, uncomfortable, even infuriating. And if you're never experiencing that, there's a problem. Thirdly, step outside your echo chamber. Don't just dismiss opposing views. Listen to them. You don't have to agree, but understanding where others are coming from can actually sharpen your own thinking. It can lead to exploration, and you may find out that this black and white attitude of it's this because of this, it's a little more gray than that, isn't it? And next, and finally, most importantly, watch your emotions. Don't let yourself get up in your feels. If something is making you feel outraged, scared, fired up, ask yourself, who's benefiting from my reaction? This is especially true for those with MAGA. The same goes for ideology and partisan influence. They thrive when we stop asking questions and start buying into the idea that we're on the right team. But when you take a step back and start questioning, that's when the real magic happens. Now, look, none of us, I know I haven't been immune to this stuff. We all have blind spots. But the goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. The more you question your own biases, the harder it is for someone else to manipulate you. So here's my challenge to all of you. Next time you're nodding along with your favorite Alex Jones episode, or you're listening to Donald Trump and, hell yeah, fuck the IRS, stop and ask yourself, am I really thinking critically, or am I just comfortable here? Because the truth is, the most dangerous trap isn't set by someone else. It's the one we set for ourselves when we stop questioning. No sacred cows, people. That's it for today. Thanks for sticking with me. See you next episode. Thank you for joining me on the Ministry of Gray, where life's complexity is not a problem to solve, but a space to grow. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who you think might need it. And visit mogpodcast.com to stay connected for all the upcoming features and interviews. Remember, the gray spaces are where we find our humanity. Until next time, take care and keep seeking.